hear myself through my headphones. Yes, man. Like, I feel real good about this right now.
Pay attention, because you are now listening to Permission to Speak Freely.
All right, so let's get right to it. So we've done one DRB since we started this podcast. We've done one DRB, and that was me doing a DRB on myself because I went to work when I had COVID and I shouldn't have, right? If you listen to the podcast, you'll get the whole story. I ain't just do no crazy stuff, so you'll get the whole story and you could kind of make a decision. But we doing another DRB. We doing another DRB today, and that DRB we doing is going to be on Damon, right? We're going to be doing, and I'm glad because I got Steve over here to help me out and make this decision, right? And then we'll get more into Steve and everything he got going on as we go through. But first thing first, we got this DRB. So Steve, so what you got, bro? What you got? We watch movies, right? We watch movies. I'm so glad we got an objective air on this one. But we watch movies and we review them, right? Military movies, our TV shows, and review them. So we went from movies to TV shows for a reason. I ain't gonna get in that reason yet because that's my big joker, right? So we went through Band of Brothers, right? We did Band of Brothers, then we did the other Navy SEAL show. And then we went to Echo 3, right? It's a show about some commandos that's on Apple TV Plus. And the Navy, what was the Navy SEAL show name, Damon? Help me out, Damon.
Terminal List.
Terminal List, right? So we said, hey, let's watch Terminal List. We'll watch it week by week and we'll review it episodically. Week 2, I think I came in here and Damon was like, hey, man, I finished the whole show. I was like, damn, like what happened to the week by week episodic reviews? He was like, I couldn't help it, bro. I finished. So I'm like, all right, cool. It just happened with this show, easy day, right? So we come back in here. We like, all right, let's go. Let's watch Echo 3. So, we watch one episode. Yeah, pretty much one episode. We came in here, we reviewed episode 2. And then last week when we talked about reviewing this week, Damon said, hey, man, I got to be honest with you. And I said, what? You watched the whole show already? He was like, yeah, man, I watched the whole show. Right. And it ain't really mean much to me at the time, but throughout the week, like it festered. You know what I mean? It festered. And I wanted to put it on the table and address it, man. Damon.
So, yeah.
You're wrong, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, I can agree to a certain extent, man. I agree I'm wrong. But let me tell you this. If the show was whack, I probably wouldn't have watched it all. But you know how you when you watch it and it's good and you want to know what's going on next. But I'm going to tell you what happened, what really happened, though. This is honest truth, man. And I think this who should be on DRB. It's my wife.
Don't do that. Don't do that to her, man. Don't do that to her.
Because I'm here to tell you, man, she like it too.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Now, I can't make her wait, man. She ready to watch it. And she like looking at me and we can't watch stuff separately. You know what I mean? So it's like, man, I guess I got to watch it too. So I feel like if I'm on DRB, talk to me, world. If I'm on DRB, I feel like she should be on DRB too.
World, since you always bring the world into this shit, world, let me bring up one more point, right? One of the reasons why we went to TV shows is because they normally last an hour. It's funny, I don't even feel like I need this. This is my big joker. Right now, it's just like I'm overplaying my hand, right? But TV shows normally last an hour. When we started reviewing movies, remember the first 2.5 hour movie, Damon? What you say? It was like, yo, it's too long, right? But if you binge watching a show, you watching it longer than 2 hours. You might watch 3 episodes. That's 3 hours.
Yeah. So one more thing too, I'm kind of doing some extra shit too, though. You know what I mean? Because when I watched everything and watch it all, I didn't have to go back.
Yeah, that's just to
review the episode. I'm doing more shit.
That's just not smart. It's just not smart.
Exactly. So I'm not hurting nothing by doing this. I'm kind of like, doing a little extra.
All right. So since DRB is a fact finding mission, right? Let's ask some questions, right? Do you think you fucked up for doing this? That's the first question. Are you wrong for this?
Oh, that's tough, bro. That's a tough one.
All right, let's bring Steve in, man. You're taking too fucking long, man. Let's bring Steve in. Hey, Steve, man, what's your thoughts on this? Should Damon be going ahead of me on these TV shows? Or is he just well in line? Or should we bring his wife into this whole thing? What's your thoughts on this, Steve?
No, man. I mean, that's on him. He got to keep his house in order if he, but
Oh, shit.
I don't know. If you're just looking at it from a content perspective, then yeah, I mean, who cares, right? As long as you're not like, you're not spilling into your review from the episode because you can't keep track of what episode. But I don't know. I think it's, if you're like, my thoughts are, who cares?
Hey,
That's
Steve,
just one man talking.
Steve, spot on, Steve. Spot on.
So I got the little
man.
joker.
Spot
I got the
on.
little joker. Glad you brought that up, Steve. When we watch Band of Brothers, right? We watched it together at the same time. So when we came and we did our reviews, we had the same amount of passion and zest when we reviewed these episodes, right? Because we were there together. Now that Damon finished the whole show, it was actually like when we were reviewing the last show, he was like, oh man, wait till you get to episode 9. Like it wasn't even like we were living together on the episode anymore. And it messed up our content, man.
Hey, I got you, bro. That makes a little bit of a sense.
Well,
but
in light of that,
I still think, I still, as long as I'm not going ahead, though, I feel like, the content is the content,
Now, I'm listening to Steve. I'm listening.
yeah.
to Steve.
It sounded like you had some. In light of that information, maybe I have to reconsider my stance. But I don't know. Can you handle going ahead, Damon? Is the question. With that,
yeah, well,
without getting all excited about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Wait till you see that, right? You get get excited, and then you lose the passion and the wonder, if you will, for what happens next.
It's a million TV shows on TV, man. It's a million.
Steve, you make a great point. You make a great point, Steve. I tell you this, Terminal List was crazy though. I couldn't hold back. I couldn't hold back.
Yeah.
So, but I tell you this, Dumbo. I think I'm wrong, man.
Thank you.
And the only reason why I'm saying I'm wrong because you one point you made when I said the fact that I was going ahead and said, man, can't wait till you see that. I got it, man.
And Steve brought it out of me, man.
By a little bit, though. I mean, but Steve made a great point too when he said, long as I ain't messing up the content. So I remember next time not to tell you, you know what I mean?
You should just go beat this up. Hey, well, look, since we have been talking about Echo 3 and we have been talking about Terminal List, I do want to bring you in a little bit, Steve, on just your history in the Navy because you are retired Navy, correct?
Yep, retired Navy SEAL Master Chief.
Do you watch these TV shows at all about SEALs and things of that nature?
Not usually. I think I did watch Terminal List. I enjoyed that. It's fantasy, but I served with the guy that wrote that series, and I was like, I'll give it a shot. And I like what's his name, the actor. I can't. And I, the stories. It's way over the top, right? Nobody's like it's pure fantasy, but if you can kind of separate yourself from that and just look at the fact that, hey, they got the tactics, the equipment, they went in, like in the old days, you watch a movie like in the 80s, 90s, it's like, you can tell it's all bullshit, right? There's no kind of really commitment to trying to get it right as tactically as possible, right? As you look at shows now, and I don't watch the other stuff really, but you look at it like I kind of think like Black Hawk Down was one of the one that kind of ushered in and World War II stuff. Band of Brothers, man, that looked awesome. I can't relate to that time period, but at least the Terminal List. I can't speak to Echo 3. I haven't seen that, but at least they're trying to do it right within that realm of fantasy. Right at a certain point, you got to be like, you can't look at Star Wars and be like, oh, I can't believe that would never happen. You're like, no shit, that would never happen, right?
Yeah. So I read a report about, actually saw it on YouTube about a group of SEALs, maybe some other special forces communities in that group, but they were not too happy with the recent surge in a lot of SEAL related entertainment and things of that nature. Do you got any information on that? Did you read that article as well?
No, I haven't read that article. It's as somebody who kind of I speak professionally, so I'm kind of out there, and I don't want to be too hypocritical and condemnation. In the old days when I was young, it was kind of like it was very frowned upon, to kind of come out and write books and do all that kind of stuff. But then at a certain point, it's like, I know right when I was in probably 6 years before I retired, there was conversations about guys coming out writing books. And it's kind of like one of the things that I pushed back on was like, well, senior leaders in the military, they go out and they make a shit ton of money on books and speaking tours. But the second it's like an enlisted guy comes out and starts talking about stuff, then all of a sudden, people lose their shit about it. Now, if you're revealing tactics, techniques, procedures, as far as how we locate, we fix targets and things like that, and things that's going to affect our lethality on the battlefield, and that's a serious issue. I know when I wrote my book, I tried to water that piece down. I tried to change things and run it through the Department of Defense to make sure that they were good with everything that I put. So that's the right way to do it. I think, it's the train has left the station in terms of like coming down on people for doing stuff, as long as they do it with integrity and honesty, and they're not going to do things that damage, I think, us, our ability to do our job as a military, and damage the reputation.
And you brought up your book. I wish that I would have, read it even before speaking with you. But how long ago was this book released?
Hey, so it hasn't even been released yet. I started this project, so it was. I retired from the military 2019, and I decided I was going to do speaking consulting, because that's what I really like to do. I like to connect with people. I like to talk about things that have helped me and how I can translate them to kind of the business world. And so I was like, well, I want to be to me, primarily, selfishly, the book was really about trying to help drive my speaking business. And I was like, well, I was already getting booked for their speeches, and I'm like, I don't want to write a damn book. I'll get somebody to ghostwrite it. And I look at how much that costs, and then bam, COVID hits. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm writing this motherfucker myself, right? And so it took me about 2 years to write. And so now it's like within a week, the pre-orders will be available, and then it launches officially on March 7th, 23.
What's the title of it?
It's called Life on the X, Navy SEAL's Guide to Meeting Any Challenge with Courage, Confidence, and Readiness. So it's kind of like a business / self-help book. There's some stories in there, but I interview like athletes and CEOs to really get their take on really how to show up with intent and being deliberate with setting the table for success when it comes to your key moments, your defining moments and key opportunities in life. So it's really about that. It's prescriptive.
Okay. It's on my list already. It's right on the list. We do books every week. We review them. I'm starting a book club very soon. It's called Book. It's called Book Club, Building on Our Knowledge. So I'm starting a book club very soon. So it's definitely on my list. Thank you for that.
Now, will Damon be reading ahead on that too?
Damon don't read the books. Damon don't read the book. Damon, tell him now what I was.
The audiobook. We got audiobooks.
Let him know, Damon.
Yeah, I'm going to start, man. I'm going to start reading these books, man. But audiobooks, in the beginning we started, I was doing a couple here and there. Then I started school. Then I kind of like just dropped off.
Then I hear you. I don't read as much as I should, but audiobooks, like go walk around the neighborhood, sit in the sun or something like that and listen. It works out great.
Yeah, I only do audiobooks now because I could go and clean up and, wash. I'm reading a book right now, and I really don't want to talk about it yet. But it's a Stephen King book, but it's a pretty weird book. So I'll get into it some other day.
All right.
Hey, I got a question for y'all, unrelated to Navy, but so the best and the greatest, right? So these are two titles that I toss around, and I separate the two titles, right? I look at the best as like the most skilled person in whatever it is that they do. So for me, for basketball, right, to talk basketball, I think LeBron James is the best basketball player that I've ever seen, right? The best basketball player that I've ever seen. But I think Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player that I've ever seen. So I look at greatest as like a person that can like overcome, like, it's not all skills. It's like heart, soul, your desire, like what you can overcome and just if you have that will to win and always kind of, be there on time, on spot. So that's my distinction between best and greatest. But I wonder what you guys think. Do y'all see a difference or what?
Well, man, I tell you, it's close for me though. Like when you think about best and greatest, it's one of those things, one or two or three things to extinguish yourself to be the greatest of all times. If we put this in the Navy terms, right? We talking about the best. We always talk about best qualified or something to that nature, right? So what could make you the greatest qualified? I don't think it's nothing out there. I don't think we look at it like that as the greatest qualified. We're looking at the best qualified, right? So if I was talking about greatest, man, I'm thinking about for my rating, right, being a DC man, right? If we talking about you trying to be the greatest DC man, I have to look at it as being the greatest repair division. I could be the best DC man, but I could be the greatest when it comes to repair division.
Can
right?
you even put this in Navy terms, man?
Hold up, I got you, bro. I got this, right? So when I'm talking about greatest, I'm talking about repair division. I'm talking about HTs, DC, and I'm talking about MRs. Now, you told me you want to be the greatest. Can you freaking use that meal? Can you use that lay? Can you freaking wail? You know what I mean? Can you be a great firefighter? Now, I'm putting this in a repair division. And you say, man, this dude, he's great because he can put all three of these jobs together in one because all those jobs in repair division. That's kind of how I can put it together, man, when it comes to like best, because you always gonna have like best. This guy here is good, man. He's qualified. He's all the way up. He's good to go. He's the best at what he's doing right now. When you talking about greatest, man, you talking about Michael Jordan, right? You know what I mean? But I put LeBron up there too when you talking about the greatest too. You know, it's just different times and different terms and people playing at different.
I'm talking about of all times. Of all time.
Yeah, I got you.
You just said it's different times.
Yeah, I know you're saying of all times, but they playing in different eras. That's why I don't get into that debate too much, man. I feel like when they play in different eras and all that type of stuff, it's just different. Michael Jordan was asked to do one thing when he played. Like LeBron could be asked to do multiple things. Only thing they wanted Michael Jordan to do is score and play defense. LeBron, assists, rebounds, scoring. He doing a lot of stuff.
Oh, but yeah, okay. I can argue that all day, but I don't really want to. Because I don't know if we know what questions were asked to Michael Jordan. Like, hey, like you wasn't in the locker room when they were asking Michael Jordan questions. You know what I'm saying? Like,
that's true.
What about you, Steve? You think it's a difference between the best and the greatest?
Well, and I think you both hit on something. You hit on some really good points. And I think, you get into language. And it's not you can define the language you're talking about, right? And you kind of articulated that. It's like, hey, what I hear you say, maybe it's not what you intended. What I heard is you're talking about the best. It's almost like at that tactical level, like skill, what you can do. Yep. And I think of like the best and in a more defined role. And I think that's what you're getting at. Like, hey, the best natural shooter. And again, I don't know shit about basketball, but as opposed to when I think great, if you look at like a Michael Jordan, and again, you're right, Damon, about the different eras, right? Michael Jordan, that was like, when you say great, is because he was such an incredible and standout brand. Obviously he was phenomenal and he was, but he was so fun to watch. Like he was so crazy to watch to somebody who doesn't really know basketball. Right. But now today it's like everybody's got a brand. Everybody's kind of ubiquitous. Everybody's out there. Right. And so I think Michael Jordan was special because of what he did in that time period. And maybe that makes LeBron more special because he stands out in front of all that noise. But to me, in the greater sense, if you're talking about best versus greatest, you probably have heard this in the Navy, right? It's all about you get to a certain position of leadership. And the question you should be asking yourself every day is, how am I training my replacement today? Mm-hmm. Right. And so when you look at great, it's like, is the legacy? Are you good at just this one thing? Are you good at this skill? Or are you also good at developing other people? Are you good at taking a whole collective bunch of people and moving it towards a common objective? And do the things that you do and say and how you show up in the world, does that leave a meaningful mark? And that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. If you leave, I believe if you leave a place and the place instantly sucks, I believe that's a discredit to your leadership ability.
Agreed.
Yeah, in my opinion. All right, Steve, let's go back. Let's go back all the way to the beginning. Did you know that it was going to be the Navy for you, however many years ago it was before you joined?
Yeah. So even as a kid, I always had something about wanting to serve, right? I always really respected the military. And as a kid that grew up in the 80s, like the Vietnam vets, like I really looked up to them, and especially like the Army Green Berets. And I was like, oh, I want to do something special. I want to be tested. I want to go through hard training. I want to be part of an elite unit. And so I was committed kind of like to joining that path, joining the Army, being a Ranger, being a Green Beret, being, SF. And then I also had an uncle who was a retired naval aviator. And he kind of nudged me towards the Navy because, for whatever reason, he was like a second dad to me. Mm-hmm. And he was like, hey, they got the Navy has special forces too. They're called SEALs. And I think at some point he bought me like a book on SEALs in Vietnam. And I was like, yeah, as opposed to kind of joining the Army, back then you had to kind of go through a career path before you could even be an SF guy. You had to already be a part of the Army for a few years. But you can be a SEAL right off the street. And so I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to go do that. And so by the time I was in high school, I was committed to that path. Okay. Probably like by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this.
And was it preparation then? Like, were you like physically preparing for it then?
Yeah, probably more so like with like the year, like the final, like my senior year, I started getting a lot more serious about it. But back then, there was no internet. There was limited information about how to prepare and how to train. And I'm like, I know I got to be comfortable in the water. I got to swim a lot and I got to run a shit ton and push ups and pull ups. And then, the summer before I graduated high school, and then I was going to join the Navy that November, that fall. And so I trained my ass off. I ran, I swam, I did calisthenics and weight training every single day. And then the other thing is that I was so bad at math that I didn't qualify for the SEAL program. And I actually, so I was a dumbass for believing the recruiter when he told me that they'd waive those few points on the ASVAB, it's like the SAT for the military, for those that might be listening who aren't military. And I show up in the military, and the first thing I do, like, nope, you're not going to SEAL training. You're going to go work on submarines. And after I went through HTA school in Philly, they sent me up to work on submarines in Connecticut. And that was kind of the path until I was able to take the test and then get accepted a couple of years later to go to SEAL training.
Okay. That's good. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. So, because I was about to ask that, because I know back when you came in, they wasn't SOs, right? You had to go in as rated, right? So now do they still go in as rated, or they go in as a SF or SO?
Yeah, kind of how it goes. So for those who might not know, like there's a rating, and in the military or in the Army and Marine Corps, be an MOS. In the Navy, it's a source rating. So that's kind of your job. That's your professional job in the military. And so when I came in the Navy, there were certain rates that you could have to go to be a SEAL, right? And so the one I picked was HT. I didn't know any better. I didn't care. I just wanted to be a SEAL. I didn't know nothing about welding or pipe fitting or any of that stuff.
Okay.
And so I joined. Today, you join, like if you want to be a Navy SEAL, you go to the recruiter and you just pick some arbitrary job. And it's really meaningless. It doesn't matter what you pick, because if you fail out of SEAL training, you got to get reclassified in a different rate anyway. So, but you pick some arbitrary rate, and then if you qualify, they'll send you to boot camp as an enlisted guy, to boot camp with a contract to be SEAL, diver, air rescue swimmer, any of those kind of dive motivators type, called Warrior Challenge candidates. And then if you pass a screening test, now for SEALs, you go out to California to do an 8-week prep course before you start your basic orientation, and then BUD/S training itself, first phase of SEAL training.
Okay. So we talked about this before, but it's actually good to have you on here to bring this up. How does it feel in that period of time where you joined the Navy for like one thing and one thing on? Well, you joined the Navy to be a part of Special Forces, and then you find out that you can't, or you got this period of time that you're waiting. During that period, how long was that period of time? You said about 2 years?
Yeah. So when I showed up and I'm like, oh, how do I get out of here? And they're like, we're not even going to talk to you about going anywhere for 2 years. Thankfully, I was smart enough that like, I'm not a really good work with your hands guy. I'm not like suited to be an HT. So I was kind of towards the bottom, like just below probably the middle to bottom of my HT class. And because there's people there that had already been like welders in the civilian world. And I was kind of like, and so I went through that, but I was smart enough to be like, I still want this. I'm going to go to a shore facility where it's only 2 years before I rotate out, and I can run, I can swim. I know I'm not going to be on some ship in the middle of the ocean, not be able to train. And so that worked out for me because initially I was really obviously disappointed and disgruntled and like, damn, this sucks. But there was a guy there who was a former SEAL. He was in Navy, but he kind of like gone through a divorce and his kids moved to New England. And so he basically left the SEAL teams, was a photographer's mate, was attached to the command up in Groton, Connecticut, the sub base there. And he took it upon himself to kind of train a couple of guys like me that wanted to be SEALs. And so I really think that it all happened the way it needed to happen for me to be successful. I got faster, I got stronger, I got some mentoring. So it really, and I don't think I was mature enough probably to be successful right out of high school. I think I needed a little more seasoning, and those 2 years did that. So I think it was good.
Yeah, because we get a lot of sailors who come to the ship, they were buds drops or something happened, right? And that's the terminology we go by, right, Damon? It's buzz drop, right? Normally that's what we say.
Drop,
yeah, or something happened, and a lot of times, their mission is, hey, I'm going back. I'm going back. And based off of experience, I can't say I've seen over 10% of them actually go back. Based off my time and experience, some of the guys, they went through some mental health issues. We had some guys have suicidal ideations. Just some guys just depressed that, I got to be an electrician. Like, that's my rate. Like, I got to be an electrician over here with Chief, and it's like, I never really, know what to say. It's like you joined for this one specific thing and it can't happen, and it's always a lot of these guys that, they worked out well and they left after, the first term, but I always wonder what exactly was going on in this seller's head. And that's just,
and that's different, right? I mean, that's different than, I think for me, I never even got a shot. So again, it was easier for me to get that first shot. And I think anymore, I think it's more difficult for a buds drop to get back because a lot of times it goes with year group. And I don't know how all of that works, but I know it's really, really difficult. And so I know it's difficult for them to do that. And that's the difference between the Army. It's like, hey, I fail out of being a Green Beret. I can still do infantry commando stuff. I can do other stuff. I can go to jump school. I can do fun stuff that's kind of in that lane. Whereas in the Navy, it's either commando shit or nothing like it, right?
Yeah.
And so people are like, I did all this and now I'm chipping paint. And so it requires a really effective, a compassionate but firm and effective leader to kind of lead those people and to really get them to say, hey, I know this is not where you want to be, but here's what you can get out of your experience right now. Here's how, if they can see past the bitterness, if you can get through to that person, to that service member, you can get them to understand that what they're doing right now can be of big value to their overall, trajectory in their life.
Yeah. So
yeah, I tell you, listening to you took that well. I know you was in the right place at the right time. And I know from my experience, I had a sailor to come to me and he didn't get to go to be a SEAL, right? But his whole family is SEALs, right? But he wanted to leave to go come into the Navy. And I guess the recruiters was telling him that, hey, you come in, when you get a rate, then you can go off and become, a SEAL. But they didn't tell him about the 2 years that you got to wait and all this type of stuff. So he gets to the ship and the first thing he gets there and he started talking about, hey, when can I leave to go, the buds and stuff like this. And I'm like, man, you have to do 2 years. And I said, now me personally, I mean, he told me his background about his family and all that stuff. I say, man, I'm gonna do everything, in my power to help you out, give you time to train and all this type of stuff. And ended up, man, we pulled in one port and I ain't see him no more, man.
He just left, huh?
He went to medical and I guess he got some type of fail to adapt. That's what he got out the Navy on, failed to adapt. But he said that's all he wanted to do. That's it. If he wasn't doing that, he wasn't doing anything else type stuff. So
yeah.
And I can get that. I mean, I'll be on. I'll be totally honest. And again, don't take this as me bad mouthing the Navy. It's not a fit for me. Like the job, like I'm sure there's a job out there that would have been a fit besides a SEAL, but I didn't see it. Mm-hmm. And so I would have never stayed in, me personally, right? Not because I'm too good for the Navy. And that's not it at all. It's just not a fit for me. I think I'd be better served, in a different branch to do that type of stuff that's kind of more a fit for me. So I would tell people, young people, it's like, don't listen to the recruiter when they tell you kind of have to join. Like if you don't get a contract to be a SEAL, then don't join. Yeah. Go. I mean, I don't know if it were me, I'd say go join the Army. Go get a Ranger contract. Go do that. If you want to be a SEAL, then I'd rather go be a Ranger than I would a sailor doing something else, because that is what is interesting to me, right?
Yeah. So 2 years, definitely. 2-year wait. Then you go to school. You go to and can you talk through the school process? Like I know it's a few schools and stuff like that. And I know we got some young sailors or some young civilians that might be listening and interested in being a SEAL. What's the kind of like the checkpoints in that process?
Yeah, I'll try to be as succinct as possible. It's, there's been a lot of changes of what happens to you before. Once you are in that pipeline, meaning like you've got orders, you're going to go, it's a lot different now than it was. Like, so there's never was a prep school. Now, the thing about the prep course is that what it does is it gives more people an opportunity to be a SEAL, right? You have people that grew up in the inner city, maybe that didn't have an exposure to a pool. Well, now we can send them to prep and now they can learn how to swim. And now that puts them up there. So they actually have an opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. What happens when you graduate, buds, is different than it was when I came in. But the core, the meat and potatoes of SEAL training is for the most part unchanged. And that starts off with, once you get through what they call it now is BOW, basic orientation. So you have the SWCC, the Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewmen, and the BUDS candidates that go through the first initial several weeks. And that's just kind of an exposure. You're kind of turning the heat up on the candidate a little bit. And then when that's finished, SWCC, they go this way, and the SEAL candidates, they start first phase of BUDS training. And that's when it's like, boom, the hammer falls. And I don't know what week it is now. They did change this piece. They moved up Hell Week sooner in the process. I think it may even be 3 weeks in now, whereas opposed it was 6 weeks when I did it. And so Hell Week is the big thing that everybody knows about, right? It's arguably the hardest week in any military training and, exposure. You're cold, wet, tired the whole week, right? And it basically tests your commitment to the program and how well that you're going to, how great of a team player you're going to be when shit gets hard, right? Are you willing to put the needs of your teammate, of your swim buddy, of your boat crew, of the mission above your own personal suffering, right? And if you can answer those two questions and you can gut it out, you make it through your major milestone. Now, within first phase, there's also a lot of things that challenge people. There's what's called drown proofing, where you have to swim and do a couple of things with your arms and legs tied behind your back, right? There's life saving, where you gotta rescue an instructor who's basically trying to drown you, underwater swims, things like that. Uh-huh. Once you finish first phase, then you move to second phase, and that's where you have dive phase. And in dive phase, you face your second major obstacle with an evolution or test, as we call it, known as pull comp. A pull comp is kind of the culmination of a 5-day pull week, where you learn basic scuba diving procedures and you get tested on it on a Friday, right? The instructor comes down, rips your mask off, rips your fins off, ties your air hoses in knots, and you got to calmly, with a breath hold, keep your shit together, problem solve. And that's pretty much the second major obstacle, right? You make it through that, you start to learn how very, very basic stuff in combat diving with a rebreather, where you just dive in oxygen, very basic combat diving skills. And then you get to third phase. And third phase, that's where you do land warfare and underwater demolition. You go out to, for the first part, you do land navigation in the mountains outside of San Diego and Laguna Forest there. And then you go out to San Clemente Island. It's one of the Channel Islands. And you go out there for another like 8 weeks of training, I think, where you're just doing land warfare, patrolling, small arms, weapons, all that kind of stuff. And when you're finished that, you graduate buds. Back in the day, we go to jump school, Army jump school in Fort Benning, Georgia. And then we go to a SEAL team, and then we go to do our follow-on training before we even got a chance to be in a SEAL platoon. Now they knock all of that jump training, free fall parachute training, all that stuff in what's called SQT. They go up to Alaska, they do all that kind of stuff. And that bridges the gap between the very, very basics at buds and the more advanced skills you learn in a SEAL platoon training workup.
And when you're in buds, you're broken out in like boat teams. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, boat crews.
Oh, boat crews. Anybody from your boat crew? Are you still in contact with any of the people that you went through with in your boat crew?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, we worked for a while. Like I would see a lot of guys at different teams, and I had great friends. And a lot of that, honestly, is on me. I'm really, it's a weakness on me. I'm not the best at maintaining relationships, right? I think if it weren't for my wife, I wouldn't have any friends. No, it's, I still maintain, there's a few people that I maintain contact with, a small circle of guys, nobody that I happen to be in my boat crew. Now you got to keep in mind, the boat crew is not like it changes all the time. As guys drop out, they're constantly shuffling. Even in Hell Week, the guys you start with, I think maybe like one guy, they do it by height, right? So, cause you got to carry, like they put everybody in a height line, and then they break off people in a boat crews because of that, right? There's one officer per boat crew if you have enough officers like we did. And then there's all constantly rotating and shuffling as people drop, as people get hurt.
Yeah. And then in hindsight, right? Was this all fun in hindsight?
It's no picnic.
Okay,
so
even in hindsight.
No, I mean, there's good, for sure. I mean, it's one of those where you're so glad to have the experience, but I mean, it's not a lot of fun. I mean,
yeah, that's good to
for
hear.
when it really sucks. But I look back and, we have, I think, as humans, we tend to look favorably on a lot of things. Like, oh, wasn't that bad? And for a lot of buds, right? I mean, you're up early for PT at like 4, and they used to make a joke. If you had a DOR button on your alarm clock, most people would never make it through SEAL training. Even fewer, I should say, would make it through SEAL training. But, a lot of times you're done at like, early on in training, at least you're done at like 4:00. You go to the chow hall at 5 or whatever for dinner, and then you're done. So you can kind of have your nights to do what you want. You just eat dinner, and then you go out and get another dinner because you're so hungry. And then the weekends pretty much are yours too, to go out and just kind of relax and chill. And if you're smart, you don't party too hard, you recover.
Was the food good in chow hall?
I mean, I think it's probably a little bit better than what you're going to get on a ship.
Ooh, yeah.
I mean, it's like eating. I mean, if I had to do over again, I would have eaten a lot better. I probably would have. Like, you just get so hungry, and then you're like, oh, I want to have that big bowl of ice cream, and then you got to go hold your breath underwater, and you just like feel like crap, right? But it's not bad. It's not bad. I mean, I was from the East Coast, kind of a smaller suburb outside of Philly, and so I go out there, and it was like my first exposure to like real Mexican food, Starbucks, stuff like that. So I'm like, I was loving that aspect of it. And you can, as a young frogman trainee, a tadpole, you can eat whatever the hell you want, right? You're not going to gain weight, right? I can't say that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from Philly too. And Tex-Mex is, I'm from Philly. I'm from
where?
Philly. I lived in South Philly for the longest, from when I was about 7 until I pretty much joined the Navy. Before South Philly, it was North Philly and West Philly. So, born and raised in the playground.
Yeah, it's real. That's the real Philly right there. I'm from Delaware County, so the suburbs.
Yeah, but all we had was Tex-Mex. Like it was Tex-Mex. It wasn't until I got to Cali to where I even really had like real Mexican food. But quick question: any memories from that training period, like memories that you're able to discuss that really like stood out for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple stories. People ask me, a lot of times, what's the hardest part of SEAL training? And naturally, people would expect me to say Hell Week. But really, I had what I thought was a big class at the time, just under 200 people. And for me, the hardest part was the first week, like the first 5 days of first phase. That's because they're really trying to they're beating the shit out of you because because they know there's a large portion of the class that doesn't really belong there. They're kind of like, hey, I'll give this Navy SEALs training thing an old college try, but they're not really bought in. And so it's like, well, let's get rid of those people. Let's get that low hanging fruit out of here. So they beat the shit out of you. And, at one point I tell the story, I came back to my room at the end of, at the end of the training day, it was like 4:00 getting ready to go to chow. And I go back and all my roommates are stuffing. There's like 6 of us to room. All my roommates are stuffing their shit in bags. I'm like, what's up, fellas? We moving? What's the deal? And they're like, yeah, we're done. And and I was kind of like, and it was a defining moment for me because right there, I'm like, it's almost like it makes you feel stronger. And then when I went into Hell Week and people are, one of the big things is they do what's called surf torture, right? Because the Pacific Ocean's always cold. And when you're constantly wet all week in Hell Week, they'll go sit you in the water crashes over your face nonstop. And it kind of like a lot of people just can't take that. And the water's cold. And so they would they can keep you in the water for so long, depending on the water temperature. They pull you out and you're standing in a line and they have like the instructors with like medical staff looking at your eyes and just kind of assessing how you are. Because you're all pretty much bordering on hypothermia. And every time somebody would quit, you're supposed to be like, no, quit. We're going to keep the class together. Every time they would quit, you ever see that movie from like 1986 called The Highlander? Where it's like they chop heads, like immortals, they fight with swords.
He gets your power, right?
He gets his power. And so every time somebody would quit, I'd be like, fuck, I'm still here. I'm like, I got this. And it would just make me stronger, And to me, I never got to the point where I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to quit. I had some confidence issues in terms of like, because I always build up SEAL training as this mythical dragon. And so when it was like pull comp, I don't know if I can do that. Hell Week, who gets through Hell Week? Land nav, that sounds hard, right? It's like all this shit. And then I'm like, well, I just got through it, right? And eventually, and that was a big thing. I think to me, it was just having a lack of confidence. And so doing all that stuff, it did give me, a level of confidence. But I always stayed humble. I always I gotta try to be better at everything. And that's what good operators do. They always try to say that what I'm doing now is not good enough, can always be better without being too hard, while still being able to forgive yourself for your mistakes.
Yeah. So what year was this? What year was this?
95.
Okay, 95.
Yeah, I went through 95, graduated. I was fortunate. I remember at one point, it's like early on, if you get hurt, if you're a good dude and you get hurt, they'll put you what was called PTRR. It's like physical training, rest and recovery. And, you'd see these guys, you'd be all like early, you'd already done your workout and these guys are just getting out of bed. They're like, oh, it's like in the sunshine. You're like, God, I wish I was them right now. And then you graduate and they're behind you in the class because they had classed up behind you again after they recovered. And you're like, well, I ain't glad that I'm them now as I'm graduating. They're still here.
My question for you is, I guess the first benchmark here would be 9/11, for me to kind of go on and ask if you had any experience. Like, what was the experience for you after 9/11?
Yeah, so
that was 01, right?
Yeah, and so before that, my first deployment to Bosnia, Europe in 1998, did some stuff in Africa too. By comparison, pre 9/11. There was, our command did some reconnaissance missions. I did some shipboarding missions in the Gulf, things like that. But all very just kind of anything you can do to do something fucking real and not just training, right? It doesn't matter how silly, I just want to do something real. And so you're boarded a ship for the first time. You're like, fuck yeah, right? In 2001, I was deployed in Europe. And I got hurt on a jump. We were doing a parachute jump and I tore my pec, separated my shoulder. And so I'm sitting there had gotten surgery and I'm back in Virginia Beach when 9/11 happens. And I had orders to go to a special missions unit that I had to cancel because of my injuries. And I ended up going to a training command, teaching other people how to, do assault training, close quarter combat. And then I finally got my first kind of combat deployment in 2004 when I went to Iraq, and then went to Afghanistan, went to Iraq a couple times, and then to Europe, back to Europe a couple times. So yeah.
Okay, here's a fun question, I think, because I watch a lot of movies, right? So, are you the guy that if it's, let's say you're in a supermarket, right, and some shit jump off, it's some would be, some would be robbers who just look super amateur. Would you be the hero in that situation?
I would like to think that I would do what was required for the best outcome.
Okay.
Right. And it's like everybody wants to talk shit, right? You're with your family and somebody wants your wallet and maybe you're carrying. All right, you can have my fucking wallet because there's no way I'm taking a chance that rounds are going to go off and you're going to hit one of my kids.
Yeah.
Right. And my car doesn't mean that, like, you can have it. Right. It's not worth it. Right. Now, if somebody's life is on the line, then it's my obligation to try to do what I can to prevent that. In terms of robbery, I'm not going to be a hero that potentially risks, somebody getting hurt for no reason, for just money and shit. But if it's like there's people trying to hurt people, then I got to do what I can. I mean, I was trained. It's still my obligation to try to do what I can to end that threat.
Yeah, because I watch, I watch a bunch of movies. And the movies would be, it's like, yeah, he was ex-special forces. Yeah. He fucked with the wrong person's sister. And then this dude just activate and just go crazy. You know what I'm saying? So I'm always interested, when it comes to like, when you have a certain, like Liam Neeson said, I got this particular set of skills or whatever, like how strenuous would it be to actually get back to that natural kind of ability that you have?
Well, it's not easy, right? It's like if you're an athlete and then you don't fucking do any of that. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden they want you to play in a college level game. And you're like, well, fuck, I can't shoot. I'm in out of shape, right? It's like people don't like none of that shit. Like you're not going to go ex-Navy SEAL goes and is working at the bank. And then all of a sudden shit goes down and you're just going to be able to all of a sudden hadn't shot a gun in forever, hadn't done it. And I'm just going to, no, like those things are perishable, right? It's like, if you want to make a shot that's difficult, like you got to fucking train. Like you have to be on your gun. Now are you going to be better than the average person? Of course you are. But like you have to really understand that you're out of shooting fitness will surely outstrip what capability that you used to have in your mind, if that makes sense, right? It's like, You're not as good as you think you are. You're not as good as you used to be because you've been out of the game.
Okay. Is promotion? So I got a couple questions about the community. My first one, because I want to get back to 04, but I feel like in order to get back to 04, I got to ask about promotion. Because by 04, what rank are you by 04?
I was an E6.
Okay, you're E6. So
HT1.
HT1. Had you ever welded at all?
No, I worked on I did some welding. I did some, like, what do they call it, where you not ship fitting, but you're putting up like little frameworks. I can't remember what it's called. But I worked in the pipe shop and I did so my welding, it's technically welding. I did silver brazing. Okay. So that's welding, right? With the acetylene torch and filler, right? And then I did hydrostatic testing on these things called RISX, rubber sound insulated isolation coupling, something like that. And they're like mufflers. So it helps muffle the sound of like high flowing, water systems on a submarine to keep it quiet. So I did that kind of stuff. So that was the extent of it.
Okay. And is this stuff during your deployments or is it just like?
No, that was before I went to Buds.
Okay, so then
once I went to Buds, I didn't touch that stuff anymore.
Okay, so you just HT1, but
which was good because I would have fucked it up.
Okay, so
yeah, you just keep your rate. And that's a funny thing is you got to keep your to your kind of promotion question. All the way from E4 up to E7, right? You're testing on the normal rate, so I got to sit here, and even though I'm not working in my rate at all, I got to sit here and study all this HT shit, right? And it probably explains why I was in E5 for a really long time because I just didn't give a fuck. It's like I'm doing fun shit, E5, E6, and then you're kind of like, all right. At a certain point, you're going to be a turd if you don't promote. So then I'm like, all right, I guess I gotta take this a little bit more seriously. It's time for me to make E6. So I kind of nailed that down. And then I made E6, and then after that, I made E7, E8 first time up, and then there was a few years before it took me to make E9.
Okay. And were you always bought into the Navy concept? So I say that like because it took me a while to buy into a lot. I was operating kind of for myself for a little bit, working, just trying to do as good as I could do, as well as I could do. And then it started to be about my people, right? So after it was about me, it was about my people. And then like lastly, I finally started to really understand as far as the tradition and the culture, and really have a higher respect for what the Navy meant as an organization, if that makes any kind of sense.
No, it makes total sense. It makes absolute sense, right? And, because your aperture opens as you get maturity and wisdom and experience, right? It's like people come in the Navy, and I would tell this when I was doing the Warrior Toughness program, when I was teaching that, right? We would teach it to the RDC, the prospective RDC school, the people that are going to be, the recruit division commanders, which were the drill instructors in the Army and Marine Corps. And so we'd be teaching them, and I'd be trying to tell them, like, look, not everybody comes into the Navy. People come into the Navy because they want money for school. They want money for college. They want money. They want exit from a bad situation. They're not patriotic. They don't give a shit about the Navy. And that is okay right now. It is your job to, that's not going to happen overnight. It's your job to start to plant those seeds, right? And so you're sitting around Chiefs mess with I'm sitting around with a bunch of Master Chiefs, and none of them joined the Navy because they were fucking patriots.
Yeah.
But they became patriots because of how they were developed, right? And they became bought in to the Navy. Now, for me, it's all about SEAL teams, right? SEAL teams just happen to be part of the Navy. And so we really identified ourselves more with a special operations command. So most of my time in the military, we would do a little stuff with the Navy when it came to like shipboarding stuff, but most of the time we're working with the Army and the Air Force, right? That's who we're working, a little bit the Marine Corps. And so that's really where I identified myself as a special operator in the Special Operations Command. And so everything in terms of history and legacy and reputation, that's all bound to kind of naval special warfare, right? The SEAL teams, the frogmen from World War II, if that makes sense. So really it wasn't until, you start making, even when you're a chief, right? In the SEAL teams, it's still all about that. And really, it wasn't until I, actually made Master Chief, went up to boot camp, and that's when I really had to be part of like the actual Navy. That's when I started getting exposed to how the Navy really works, like big ranking boards and SOY, SOQ. We did that, but at a much smaller scale. Now you're talking about doing it for like a couple, 1,000 people, a couple thousand people, right? So it was an eye opener for me.
Yeah, and this you talk about just Great Lakes, right? Just our like regular recruit training command.
That's right. Yeah, so that was my path, right? And we didn't really talk about that, but so I was coming up on. I just finished one of my final tactical milestones called Troop Chief, where you're basically a senior enlisted leader for 2 18-man SEAL platoons at the time, and you're platoon chief, and then you move up to that position where you're the chief of both platoons, right? And so I had made it. They're like, hey, you did that. You got ranked good enough. You should make Master Chief, and you're going to have to move. And so I'm like, well, my wife had a job. We were homesteaded, and I'm like, all right, well, let's at least send me somewhere where I know I can be home every night and let my wife have some predictability. And so that was boot camp, right? And I knew I was going to get moved. I worked at Dive Motivator, kind of overseeing the program where people come in with contracts to be SEALs, diver, air rescue swimmer. And while I was doing that, I actually, I made Master Chief while I was up at boot camp, actually. And then I was asked to start up this Warrior Toughness program with a psychologist and a chaplain. And that's really what I spent my last final years. But while I was doing that as part of like the E9 mess, E9 kind of mafia there, right? Really feeling how, like, really learning how senior enlisted leaders help to run the command.
Okay. And I really do want to dig into Warrior Toughness a little. But before I get to Warrior Toughness, I want to go back to 04. Right. I want to go back to 04 where things really, start getting active and you start to see some action, if that's the best way to say it. Any major experiences there that you remember that you are willing to share?
Yeah. So I kind of joined late. I was actually at a training command, and I was like, it's kind of, I had done a good job there according to my leadership, and they're like, and their bonus, like they're like my reward was getting to go downrange into combat, right? And so I jumped into they were short a communicator, a radio guy. And so I wasn't a radio guy, but I was a sniper. And so we get a lot of communications training. And so I went downrange to kind of backfill that guy who was home on like paternity leave, And so while we were over there, the guys had gone from like doing assaults to now we were tasked with providing the mobile security details. Almost like if you look at like what the Secret Service does for the president, well, we were tasked with doing that for the brand new Iraqi government, right? We'd gotten rid of Saddam Hussein, all that kind of stuff. And now we're trying to stand up a well-represented Iraqi government. And so we had, my troop had the deputy prime minister of Iraq. And so that was a lot of my job. But every day we were taking rockets, we were taking mortar from the red zone. We were in the green zone, which is kind of like the contained area where it's kind of like it's safe, right? And that's where the government is. And so, but we're taking mortars, we're taking rockets. And so they're like, hey, let's get some snipers and comms guys. Let's get some sniper elements out there and start trying to, take out these guys that are launching mortars and stuff like that. And so that was really where I got my first taste of combat, going out on these sniper operations. And sometimes we're hanging it out there and they know we're there and they start coordinated attacks on our positions. And that was really, my first combat experience, taking heavy fire, pinned down. We got Army guys there on the rooftop with us, kind of providing extra security for us. And, and then somehow the enemy getting close enough, throwing grenades at us, kind of going off right next to me. Lucky that I didn't get killed or fucked up. That was really my first exposure to it.
Yeah. Now, while all this is happening, are you thinking about eval bullets?
No, we're not thinking about eval bullets, right? You're thinking about, it's a lot of things going on, right? It's a lot of like, hey, I'm getting tested. I need to make sure that I pass the test of doing the right thing, of able to maintain my composure when shit goes sideways, being able to perform, being able to make sure that, I'm seen as somebody that can stand up and do the job when things go sideways. And then, that's what you're focused on. And you're like, all right, I survived that one. Now I want to get out there and do it again as soon as I can. Right. And that depends, right? It depends. My exposure is, and I'm very candid with this, like my combat experience, I enjoyed my combat time, but it's easy for me to say that because like, while I saw some really horrible shit, what I didn't see were my friends getting killed in front of me. And a lot of my friends can't say that. And so I'm very careful to really differentiate those two experiences, right? Because I don't have to deal with that. And I know a lot of my friends do. And so I'm sensitive to that also.
So I asked that question as a joke, but I also asked that question because in our community, the evals are almost like a driver for like a seller, like performance and things like, would you agree, Damon?
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah, like
man.
eval, like
drives
that's
everything.
Like, my eval. And I'm always assuming that, in the SEAL community and special warfare community, it's not like that eval doesn't hold as much weight as it does to like, our guys.
It does when you're right. You're right in what you're saying a lot of times because it kind of goes like this. It's like you have to for you to make like you typically an E5 pretty much in your first platoon, but for you to make E6, it's like you're just going to make E6 pretty much. If you can pass the test, and it's, again, for me, it was just got to test it. I got to pass the HT. I don't have to, all I got to do is pass the thing, right? I don't have to score high enough.
Hard enough, right? That's like hard enough, right?
It's hard enough, right? If you're not at HT, but those easy ranks. Now, when it comes time to make chief, now it gets more competitive, right? And so basically you're ranked. And so it's almost like you get ranked and then you write the eval based on how you get ranked, right? So it's like, it doesn't, you just write the shit that's supposed to go that supports and justifies the rank that you've gotten, if that makes sense, right? So it's like, hey, you're a good operator. What's that?
I was going to say, it makes more sense than how we do it.
To a point, right?
Yeah,
but you also, you got to think, we're very like, our wickets are pretty clear, right? I mean, I know it is the same for a lot of you, but there are certain special jobs that we can do that aren't going to be the best from our promotion, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like, you got to have, if you have a strategically vital job where you're not necessarily, it's not something that you can maybe be very clear on an eval about. It's about what do you manage, equipment, budgets, who are you leading, who are you developing, right? As you start getting up there for chief. And, you've got to be able to do that. And even for us, as you start to get up there in rank, E78, E9, you have to have, once you get up for Master Chief, you have to have like a good track record of successfully completing some very specific milestones. Like, I would not make Master Chief unless I did some crazy shit. I would not make Master Chief unless I was a troop chief, right? I was a senior enlisted leader for a SEAL troop or equivalent element. Maybe it's like a joint, something like that. Like, it's got to be, but even that, it's got to be very, like, you got to hit those wickets. And then it's like, all right, well, within that, how did you get ranked? Because if you were a bottom, if you're kind of a turd, even though you successfully did it, maybe it's not the right word, turd, but if, let's say you didn't do as well as your peers, you're not going to get promoted. You're not going to make, like, not everybody's going to make Master Chief.
Yeah. Yeah. Damn. Okay. Yeah. That whole ranking first, Damon, before writing the eval, I like that.
Yeah. I mean, then you write it towards the ranking. I like that part too.
Yeah.
You write it towards the rankings. That's,
I'll say this, what made me very proud of our Navy, at least from my limited perspective, is like, I'm sitting there and I think at any one point, like, there was probably 7, 8 Master Chiefs at Recruit Training Command. Pretty much, you've got females, you've got probably 4 different races, ethnicities, and I couldn't think of how it could be done any more professionally or fair, right? In terms of gender, in terms of whatever that is, it was like you had everybody. I really felt like it was very merit-based, and obviously things are difficult, right? You have challenges. Okay, somebody went on like maternity leave. All right, what's the right thing to do there? Because they weren't doing their job, but at the same time, you can't punish them. And so you've got to, like, it's very thoughtful. And I was proud that, like, I could see that it was done as fairly as possible to make sure the right people got promoted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bro, you brought up something just then, man. That's one of the hardest things right there, man. When somebody's doing something, for themselves or for pregnancy or whatever the case may be, they doing that, but how are you going to rank them? You know what I mean? That's hard. They haven't been, like you said, they haven't been doing their job at all.
Yeah.
Right. But my mission is to get, inspections and do this stuff, but they haven't been doing it. Man, that is so freaking hard to justify, because you got these sailors that's doing their job and doing it at a high level, but still you can't say this sailor would have been doing the same thing.
Well, yeah, like,
if,
Well,
you don't even have the bullets.
And what's more difficult, like at a SEAL team, you have the SEAL operators, right? The people that go out, and then when we deploy, we will get attachments, right? We'll get people like your electronics warfare folks and your EOD techs that kind of enable us, meaning they're the tactical enablers. They actually go out on target with us. But then you have the support techs, right? All your engineering folks that do your boats, your motors, your vehicles, your admin, right? And so they're kind of ranked like separately almost, right? You have your operators and you have your support techs. And it's almost like, it was kind of analogous to that when you go to like Recruit Training Command, where the red ropes, like the ones that are actually the recruit division commanders, are fucking busting their ass, right? And they're like the SEAL operators doing the hard shit. And then you have the other folks who are doing a great job, but they're not putting in the hours. And then that becomes very difficult with how you rank those people, right? So you can be badass at your job, but you're not putting in quite those hours because those recruit division commanders work really hard, and it's a tough job if you've ever done it. But so how do you rank those people? So it's difficult. It's thoughtful. You got to really have your ducks in a row to make sure it's as fair as possible, because you have to still have your other people, the support people at recruit training. I can't remember what the term we used was, but you got to give them a shot to be competitive ranking wise as well.
Mm-hmm. So warrior toughness.
I think for me, go
No, go ahead, because I'm about to change the whole damn topic.
Yeah, okay. I had one thing, man, that to me that was kind of difficult, man. Especially when it comes to ranking and things like that. How do you you get in there, you ranking a lot of sailors, right? When is that point somebody gonna say, hey, it's not about my sailor? Right, that's the levels of things. I know when you at a CN chief, you at a chief at a master chief level. Especially when I was a chief, it's all like I was telling you, I'm going in there. It's all about my DC1, what I'm trying to get him at, and what I'm trying to get him at. But when you talk about at a recruit RDC, you got, man, it's a lot of freaking sailors up there, a lot of sailors. And what I really wanted to say here was, if you ain't got a good person briefing that sailor, right? Was that ever a problem for you guys, if you from a briefing standpoint? Because everybody ain't great briefers, right? But you have to step there in front of people and talk about your sailor. If you're not good, do that hurt your sailor?
Yeah, it definitely can. And I like what you said, right? It's about you like a dog with the bone almost, right? It's like you're like a politician who's got to bring that bacon home to his home state, right? Or and you're like, all right, well, at a certain point, you hope maturity and integrity kicks in, where, it becomes really hard. And I've seen it. It's like people just won't let it go. I'm like, dude, your guy is not as good as that guy. Fucking give it up, right? Let it go. Yeah. And people with integrity, especially as you climb more senior rank, you'd like to see people like, yeah, you know what? Especially somewhere at boot camp, right? It's never one person. It's like, yeah, somebody might go in and brief, but there's always a hope, like, especially when you're doing, like, let's say, when you're doing like the E7 rankings, you got a whole room full of E8s. And it's not just one person may be briefing it, but there's a whole room full of people that also will, and you get that tribalism too, but you have enough people in there to be like, yeah, I saw this, that'll speak up on that person's behalf. And then the Master Chief's like, everybody knows, right? If that person's a performer, now it can get into a dogfight between those number ones. It can get into the dogfight as you're getting from those MPs to those Ps, right? But, for the most part, it works itself out.
Yeah, I try my best to play bully ball when I'm in there. I would choose a different tactic if it was a Navy SEAL in the room, though. I had to think twice about my bully approach. No, me, I'm super like, I want to list everything out, write everything down, Excel. So I actually like to come heavily prepared for that, piece. And I'm also that weird, I'm gonna raise my hand on this one sailor thing. Like, I am that too sometimes. Like, everybody, oh, we cool. Yeah. He number 7. People at the rank, all right, we cool. He number 7. Hold up. Hold up. We just said this person had a chance to be number 6. So now how are we, here we go. Another 30 minutes.
Domino effect. Yeah. Domino effect.
Well, at a certain point, you want justice too, right? You want you want to make sure, right? It's like, no, like, if you really feel strongly, it's like, and hopefully, you set the table effectively by writing out on the whiteboard what weight you give all these things. And like, at least at Recruit Training Command, I keep going back to Recruit Training Command, because that was like as Navy gets, right? And it's based on my exposure to the Navy, right? And it's like, like master training specialist, all these different watch positions, right? Based on where you are. Like, if you're on push or you're taking a hold job, right? Where you're kind of, between picking up your next division, what are you doing? Are you completely sitting back with your feet up, or are you doing something? Are you getting your master training specialist? Like, so how effectively, so you basically look at somebody and you're like, he doesn't have this or this. She doesn't have that, P, right? Because they simply don't have what they need to be competitive. So you easily shuffle those people down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you take the time to write everything out and weight everything, and then you get a lot of things just knocked right out. And then then it's down to like those 2-3 people.
Now, see, we came off ship. So when I came on the ship off of DDG, it's kind of more easy. We kind of know everybody. We know who's the rock stars. We know everything. But I was just thinking about RTC on how fucking. We're still fighting. Yeah, we still fighting. But a lot of times you fighting just to. A lot of times you fight just to fight.
Yeah.
Sometimes I be that's Sailor probably.
Yeah, I hear you. You see that.
But at RTC, man, it's like a lot of people coming from a lot of different places and stuff like that. I can see that.
Yeah, crazy. And the jobs kind of in line. Some of the jobs are in line with each other. But I do want to go to Warrior Toughness because my question is, when you went over to Great Lakes, you went over knowing that you were going to be involved in this program already?
No. And so basically what happened, I came on to do the Dive Motivator program. And so it was essentially, I was going to be there for, I think it was a 3-year billet, and I had like 4 years left in the military. So I'm like, I think that's right. I think I'm speaking truth right there. And so I was there, and I was probably at year 2, and the chief of naval personnel goes through this whole review. So you had some shit going on in the fleet, right? Some missiles being fired at ships, right? All the while set against the backdrop of like, hey, no shit. Like our senior leaders, right? We're like, we may be facing open naval seas combat, the likes in which we never have seen since World War II, right? Our peers, near peer competitors, the Russians, the Chinese, whomever that might be, we got to fucking level it up, right? And right now our sailors aren't there, right? Because, when I came in the Navy, right, maybe it's the same for you, right? It's like, join the Navy, because joining the Army is stupid. Like, we don't need to go out there and like, you get dirty, like living in mud, right? We can be on a ship, and we're going to be smart, right? We're going to be technical war fighters. Well, that's fine until shit goes sideways and you got to pull burning bodies out of after 2 ships collided or whatever. And so we didn't have sailors necessarily, enough sailors that had that kind of warrior mindset. And so they basically said, Admiral Richardson came out with his design for maritime superiority, and he released his 4 core attributes, one of them being toughness. And I'm the dumbass who's in an all hands call with the CNO. And I'm like, sir, well, okay, we're talking about toughness. Well, how the hell do you measure that? What is it specifically? And how do you measure it? Who knew my dumb ass would be figuring out those 2 questions like within 6 months later, right? I'm helping to create a program with a chaplain and a clinical psychologist based on mind, body, soul, and how we're going to start at boot camp to develop a proven program to get our sailors tougher.
Though I remember when this first came out, that's how I was saying too, bro. Warrior Toughness with a psychologist, a chaplain, and a Navy SEAL. That's kind of how they sold it too, man, with a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
I was that man.
And you're the guy, huh? Okay, so
and the reason for that is because you have 2 kind of resonant, right? You look at like what our lanes were supposed to be initially. Initially, it was like, hey, the SEAL is all about physical training. So the body piece, right? The mind, it's going to be about the psychologist, right? How do we get in there? Performance psychology, sports psychology, mindfulness training. And then the chaplain's going to be all things related to character, right? Not only do we need people that are fully committed because of their character and their investment, but they also have to be people that can make good moral and ethical decisions, right? As we kind of went through it, really, you have people, it's like, well, who's going to listen to a chaplain, right? You got some E5 sailors, some hardcore sailors. Who's going to listen to a chaplain? Who's going to listen to some psychologist? We need somebody who's kind of been in combat, that's trained people to be in combat, that could kind of represent the program. And that's kind of why I got picked.
And so when this topic first came across our desk, we had it on our notes to talk about on a podcast, and then we pushed it, and then we pushed it, and then we pushed it, and then it wasn't on our notes anymore, right? And I'm actually a little happy that, because what were we going to do? Well, we were going to read through a nav admin and most likely read through the fact sheet and talk about it as we kind of perceived it. So I'm actually happy. It's a blessing in disguise that we actually have you here for those questions. My first question is when it was initially brought up to you, did you buy into the idea of warrior toughness?
I did. And here's why. Because now, did I buy into all facets of it? No. Were there some friction points between me and like some of the chaplains? Yes.
I'm sure.
But in the SEAL teams, it's all about like the one thing we're competitive. We are hungry. So we're constantly looking to level up our skills, our abilities, and what we're capable of. And so we always go to the experts. So it's like, hey, we're going to do some stuff in the mountains. Let's hire some of the best mountaineers in the world. Civilians are going to teach us how to do that. We want to be better at shooting. We're not going to learn from other SEALs. We're going to learn from professional competitive shooters. They're going to teach us. That's going to make us as good as we can be. And so when it comes to like, you're going to teach me some mental skills, because I knew that mental skills helped me like in difficult situations in the SEAL teams, right? But I didn't necessarily know enough to really apply them. And so I looked at it like, this is a great way. People need to be able to really maintain composure, because when you hear some of the stories about what happens when some of these ships collided, you have sailors that just were combat ineffective because they just lost their shit. They melted down. They could not. And you see this a lot now. Like you've had like a lot of the younger generation, they feel more anxiety. They've never been allowed to fail. And so when they're faced with something like that, catastrophic, they don't know how to react. They react, but they don't necessarily know how to respond. And so that was really critical. It's like, hey, we're always in the SEAL teams looking for an edge, and so should you. Because one day your shipmates, they may need you to fucking pull them out, right? What sailor's gonna show up that day? The combated effective one, or the one that's gonna help fight back and save that ship, right? I think it's like that.
Did you have to fight for anything? Like, let's say you had an idea, you wanted to incorporate something into the program. Did you ever have to fight to make sure something, like, for instance, like if somebody came up to me and they wanted me involved in something, it was a group project, let's say I'm making a cake, for instance, let's say it's a cake. And I'm like, hey, I don't give a fuck what we do. We going to keep the cookie crumbles on this cake. No matter how much we change it, no matter what we do, them cookie crumbles are staying on this damn cake. Was it ever anything that you had to make sure, hey, if I'm involved in this, for the sanctity of what we're calling this thing, this has to stay?
Not really. And I'll be honest, like I had certain contributions, but I would say, like, to be completely honest, like the chaplain, but especially the psychologist and some of the other psychologists, but primarily the main psychologist that I worked with, she did a shit ton of heavy lifting to get this program. And I would say of the three of us, like, she probably was the most important in terms of what was being delivered content wise. I think the fight is always, when you're talking about some shit like this, and I would guarantee that you have people within your commands, you talk warrior toughness, that they're going to be naysayers, right? Because of how it's being sold. And really what I did was I helped demonstrate a proof of concept, right? We ran our program at boot camp through study control groups. We proved that it was effective, but like the delta remains. How do you actually get that and move it on to A schools and then ultimately the fleet? And so the thing that I started, my vision for where that would go would look quite a bit different, right? In terms of how we train. Like, everything that we should do should be training for high stress situations, for eliciting a certain response when it comes to performing under pressure and in the face of fear. And so I think buy-in is always, especially when you look at pushing it out to other commands. Like, people feel threatened by programs that, that they could see as taking away their power. It's not how I fucking did it in the 90s. So I'm going to resist it at every turn. Right. Yeah. So it's a lot of that.
So how were y'all able to observe like this program as you were doing? I'm going to say like beta tests, right? For lack of a better word, like beta tests. And you could give me a better word if you have one. But how were you all able to observe the progress and if this was working?
Right. So the first thing we did was we basically did a couple of what we call feasibility pilots. And so what that was is we're not collecting data in terms of process improvement. We're collecting data with how we integrate this training, right? So you're going to have a study and control group, right? You're going to have, so for example, if we're doing what we call guided mindfulness exercise, let's say it's at nighttime, you're going to give people a certain exercise where they're going to go through there. They're going to start off with a breathing exercise. You're going to have them use imagery to visualize certain things to get them, and because it's all helping to really sharpen your frontal cortex. It's really helping. It's basically like you're bodybuilding for your brain. You're strengthening your brain. And so we would do that. And so we're going to do that. And that whole thing's going to take 10 minutes. Okay. Well, the division across the compartment across the other side of the ship, they're in the control group. And so they're going to be doing that exercise says 15 minutes. Okay. We're going to have them sit quietly for 15 minutes. Okay. Now, when we go to the pool, we're going to use a certain mental skill. We're going to use mental rehearsal to visualize, and especially if you're scared of the water, right? If you've never swam, then this is really, really effective. Somebody who's, super comfortable in the water. But again, it's just an opportunity. Line handling, things like that, where people are yelling at you, that's a different mental skill exercise, right? And so you would do that. The next division comes in and you just do something that's kind of randomized. Like it's not that mental skill, but it's doing something somewhat similar. So you can kind of compare apples to apples, right? And then after that, then you actually start to measure things, right? You start to measure inspection scores, right? You remember in boot camp, like you have to not only fold your clothes, but you have like the drill instructor, right, will come in and yell at you, your general orders and all that stuff, right? And you're graded individually, but also as division, right? Your PT scores, your entrance PT scores, your exit PT scores, all those little things are measured. What was interesting was, if you remember boot camp, people just want to break, right? People want to take a knee. So a lot of people are sick or hurt, right? They go to medical. And so what happens is you don't have as many people. Let's say you start off with a division of, 200 people. And, typically maybe of that division, maybe 130 graduate on time. They may roll back to another division. But what we found was those that got, warrior toughness, we had less people trying to find comfort, right? So our on-time graduation rates now, instead of 130, are probably like 180 or something like that. So you're getting more people to the fleet faster, and you're saving the government money, and you're providing relief to sailors' butts and seats where they need to be.
Okay. So it's like people, I was just going to say, it's like people not putting their packs down because they've learned some exercises on how to be resilient. That's
right. Yeah. And so I think it's useful for me to define kind of what toughness was. We had to kind of define it, right? What's toughness? Because people will be like, what's toughness versus resilience? And so we define it in 3 areas. The first one is take a punch and keep on going. And this has both a tactical definition as well as like an overall life definition. Example, right? Take a punch, keep on going, right? That's you on a ship, missiles just inbound, friends are killed, friends are wounded, you're hurt, got to get back up, you got to get back in the fight, right? Take a punch, keep going. Okay. Let's say you just suffered a loss in a relationship. Girlfriend, boyfriend broke up with you. You didn't get that promotion, right? That's a punch. You got to take that hit and you got to respond to it. You got to get back in the fight, right? You got to keep moving forward. You got to perform under pressure. So think about it like, whatever it is that stresses you out in the job, like you got to get up there and you got to, if it's combat, right? Bullets are flying. You got to deal with that. You've also got to deal with it like in boot camp, right? When you've got to deal with like, I'm super stressed and now I got to go home. I got to walk through the front door of my house where my spouse is stressed. My kids are screaming and I got to effectively lead there too. I can't be a shit show in my house. I got to lead there. And then 3, you got to deal with day in, day out grind, right? And you look at that twofold, right? In special operations, right? The height of our combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, especially in Iraq, you may be going out 2-3 hits a night, right? It's constant, right? And after 6 months, you are mentally and physically spent. Right. The opposite side of that coin is right. You're on a ship somewhere and you're watching a radar screen and 99.9% of the time, nothing happens. Yeah. But when it does, people die, right? If you're not locked on, if you're not switched on. So you have to be just as engaged at the end of that 6-month deployment. And so really it's getting about those things, that element of toughness, because resilience, like you remember like OSC, operational stress control. Right? It's all about going from red back to green. Well, my point is, I don't give a shit if you can bounce back to where you were after you've dealt with a hardship. None of that means fuck all if you couldn't perform in the first place. I need to train you to perform in the first place, and then I want you to be able to bounce back to that same high level performer.
Mm. Hey, so my question is, the training for boot camp, when did that take place? Like, you guys just went in, or you guys added a week or two to boot camp?
No, we just I don't think we didn't really add much. We just we kind of refined and we tweaked. That's what we did the feasibility pilots to make sure that we could smoothly inject that into our training, right? And I don't remember exactly. Like, I didn't really have that task for the actual the schedule flexing of that, but it really didn't add much time. We streamlined a few things, but you're talking like exercises before certain events, right? And it's like, we're teaching this class, right? And it's an introduction, right? It's like boot camp. It's like going to Buds, right? Like, I learned how to do combat diving at Buds. I'm not capable of going out and doing a real world ship attack now in our enemy harbor. No, I need to keep going. And that's the challenge, right? Is how do we take that very basic warrior toughness and grow it and export it and expand it, right? So in terms of the schedule, like, it's nighttime exercises or whenever, it's like on the spot. And also, like, one of the key signature things that we had is recalibrate, right? You think about this recruit or anybody in training. Like, in the example I always use is firefighting. You have a recruit, first time away from home, the parents maybe never made them do anything hard. They're stressed out. They miss home. They haven't been sleeping. And that the instructor's yelling at them and they get overwhelmed. And they just fucking lock up, right? You've seen that look of overwhelm, combat ineffectiveness loss, training value loss. We tell that recruit to recalibrate on the spot. Now, they've already been trained how to do this. When we tell them to recalibrate, they remember, okay, I'm going to lower my energy by doing some very specific slow breathing exercises. And once I've calmed down a little bit, we're going to tell them what their kind of objectives are, and we're going to push them back into the fire. And so we teach them that, constantly telling them how to recalibrate so that they can learn how to cope with stress on the fly. Because next time they have that feeling, it may be for real. And we got to get them to be able to navigate through that stress.
Okay. So and based off of what my definition of being great is, to kind of bring that conversation back a little full circle, it's some of those intangibles for me about being great. Like the Kobe Bryant still playing on a bad, foot, or the Michael Jordan still playing while sick. I mean, those are some of the things for me that define being great. So it's not about stepping out of the game. It's about being able to play through the pain and through some of the stress, the stuff that you're capable of being able to play through, right? Because everybody can't play through every pain, right? You can't just lose your foot and still try to run 2.5 miles. You don't have a damn foot. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, so that to me has, like, for me, and I'm not sure if we hit every wicket, but it gives me a much better kind of ideology about what warrior toughness is than the fact sheets and some of the literature that I read. I'm better in communication anyway than reading literature.
Who wants to read that shit, right? I'm the same way. I mean, it's hard. Nav admins, it's like, if you want to fucking get somebody to absorb information, why are you going to put it in that format? Right?
Yeah.
It's like, or read this message traffic to get a good handle. Just fucking write the normal shit, right? That's always my frustration. Like, I can't read this.
Yeah, it's like ZZ.
Dash, Zulu, fucking. And now what?
Yeah. What are we talking about? Like, you know what I'm saying? We always have people on and we talk so much about, the job and, all this shit that we can relate to. And we always miss family. Like I feel like we never get to family and our spouses who are the main ingredient to a lot of our success and our resiliency in our career. So before, you do get out of here, Steve, I do want to ask you about your wife, your family, and I think you said you did 27 years, right? And just navigating your career through. How long into your career did you get married?
So like I said, I went through, joined the Navy in fall of 92. I got married. I met my wife in 2000. We got married in 2003. Mm-hmm. So a good chunk of it, pretty much most of my time in the SEAL teams. And, it's a miracle that she stuck with me. And, I'll say this, like, vulnerability or whatever, but a lot of the stuff that I'm most passionate about trying to communicate to other people are based on kind of my shortcomings, my failures, my mistakes, right? I talk about how important it is to kind of lead with character. And that doesn't mean that I've always done that. It certainly doesn't also mean that, like, when I talk about, maintaining your focus and your composure, doesn't mean that I can always do that, right? But the difference is that I recognize that it's still something I'm committed to. So when I make those mistakes, when I fall short of what my personal values and beliefs and principles are, that I hold myself accountable, right? And I've got no choice but to move forward. And that's important, right? Because I don't want people to think that if they can't live up to these ideals, right? You set yourself a standard, right? You live by a personal mission statement. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to fall short of that, right? It doesn't mean you're a fraud. It just means that you got to take accountability. You got to learn from it, and you got to just keep moving forward. I just wanted to put that out.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest mistake that you made?
Man, I don't want to get into a lot of details on that sense, but I just think, honestly, if I frame it broadly, it's like I could manage, like, let's say I could manage certain things at work. Like, you can, and I think this is not unique to me, right? You keep it together for your professional, and then you just kind of let your guard down. And then oftentimes your family has to deal with that bullshit, right? And I know that was the case for me. And I didn't always make the best decisions when it came to putting my family first, my wife first, and just things like that. I didn't always make the best moral, ethical decisions. And I think maybe because of that, I realized just how important it is to endeavor to strive for doing those things.
Yeah, I'm going through right now. We just got hit with an option to go back out to sea, right? And if it happens, it could be like a 90-day hit. Like, I could fill out my 1306 is 90 days. Same time, right? My wife, she got a very personal matter that I don't even know if I'm able to discuss on the podcast yet, right? With my wife. And it's crazy because I'm super, super transparent on here, but I don't think I could talk about this yet.
No, it's not your decision, maybe. Completely, right?
Yeah, but on top of all of this, she's in the process, in the very early stages of it, looks like she's about to have, if anybody listening, they know she just got her degree, her master's. She's a clinical social worker. And it looks as if she's in the process of being onboarded for a job, right? So at the same time, she does her interview for this job. I get this message saying I could go back out to sea within 90 days. And it's dangling. They dangling the carrot. And I might, go for it. And it's like, damn, another one of those decisions. And as much as I don't, want to, so my whole thought process was, I don't want to make a decision for her to move just because I'm moving, right? But in me trying to not make a decision for her to move, I'm also trying to make a decision for her not to move. So I had to step back and whatever it is that she wants to do in her career, she could do it and we could kind of talk about it later. I did want to geobatch for a little bit so, she could get some acquaintance with this new job. So I definitely, I say all that to say that I definitely understand that I think we all do. We definitely understand that sacrifice. I had a friend of mine who I believe might be a mutual friend of ours, but he told me, Aaron Paul, who was on our podcast before, he told me one of his things that he regrets. It's funny, I don't even know if I'm saying it, but he told me one of the things that he regrets is just moving around and like family moving as well, and not having those moments to kind of bloom and blossom. And fortunately, he got a great wife who's doing great. But he did say, he wish his family didn't have to move around as much as he did, and so I'm thinking about those things too.
Well, it's I think that's the one thing civilians don't understand, right? They think like, okay, well, yeah, you go to war and you do this, but it's like, what doesn't get talked about is that grind, that family grind that you put through, right? And I think oftentimes the unit, right, the family unit that goes to war, right, to include the spouse and the kids that got to support home side, right? They don't get necessarily enough credit for that. And I think it's like my wife used to drive her fucking nuts when like she'd have friends and be like, God, my husband, he's got to go away. He's going to be gone almost 5 days. Like, oh my, I don't know what I'm going to do. And she's like, do you realize who you're talking to? Right. You know, my son's my husband's in Iraq right now for fucking 5-6 months. Right. People don't realize that. And I guess my advice to people is just, and I don't know that I've navigated this to the greatest extent possible, but it's like, hey, you're doing these things right now. It's like, you got to kind of bank those credits with your spouse, right? You know, because you got to let her cash that shit in eventually, right? Is like, it's all about you right now because it's not a lot of options. Like, you don't necessarily have a lot of choices about the military, but you will have choices at some point. You will have the opportunity to kind of make sacrifices, right? For your spouse, to let them kind of, you know, have their moment in the sun to do great stuff, right? So I guess just remember that. Remember the sacrifices that he or she is making for you right now, and try to make up for it at the twilight of your career and after.
Yeah, that's spot on, man. That's kind of where I'm at in my Navy career right now, because I already know wherever I go, if I was worth to go to somewhere else, it's not going to be in San Diego, right? So I know that, and I got kids in high school, and I'm not trying to go to VA. I'm not trying to go to Florida. I'm not trying to go to, not right now. But if I know they already talking about it, so like you said, it's probably time to catch that, you know, and then think about, you know, family a little bit more right now while I can, because if I'm gone, ain't nothing I can do, you know. And so I got a chance, I got an option, so I think I'm about to take that option.
Yeah.
To retire anyway.
Yeah, Steve, I listened to you talk about warrior toughness, and just listening to you talk about it, I was kind of taking a sense that you learned a little bit about it too on a mental health side of the house.
100%. I learned a shit ton, and I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah.
And I still maintain, I'm still good friends with the psychologist and the chaplain too. But yeah, I had a good friendship with the psychologist, a young lady, I think she started off as a lieutenant commander when we kind of parted ways. I still maintain contact. She's great. She taught me so much, and I'm grateful for that opportunity to be a part of that and learn so much.
Yeah, I really wanted to move out more to the fleet. Like it should move out more to the fleet. Like we heard about it in boot camp. Everybody heard this story, right, about the chaplain, about the psychologist and the SEAL, and we know everything. We got all the knowledge. We know it's rolled out in boot camp, right? But I really want to see it maturate in the fleet and like inculcate, right? That's the word the Navy like to use, like become more of a part of like every command's and the big Navy as a whole's culture. Based off my perspective, I haven't seen that yet, as much as especially we do with the whole, it's a new kind of thing. I'm not sure how close to the ground you are, but it's a thing called Get Real, Get Better that like I hear Get Real, Get Better at least 10 times a day. So I definitely want us to move forward in that direction. So warrior toughness, we talked about, I appreciate that. We did talk about your time as a SEAL. We talked a little about family. I appreciate that. But and then the book again, can you tell us the name of that book again, just for the listeners? And it's coming out.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dano. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's called Life on the X, Navy SEAL's Guide to Meeting Any Challenge with Courage, Confidence, and Readiness. And it'll be out on Amazon on March 7th. You can do pre-orders here probably in the next week. And if you do a pre-order, we're going to do a little like kind of bonus. So basically the content that I talk about, it's almost like in the SEAL teams, we have, I don't know if you do in the regular military, like you go out and you have like in your body armor, little cheat sheets. Like is somebody like who's not a radio guy, I'm not like a JTAC calling in fire, but if I ever get stuck by myself and I need to do that, I can pull out this little laminated cheat sheet. So if you pre-order the book, I include like a cheat sheet that you can always have that tells you like really quickly, you're preparing for something important. Let's go through this checklist and make sure you have everything you need to be dialed in for your big moments. So yeah. But yeah, it's a prescriptive book. Again, a lot of good stories about professional athletes and how they focus. And that's the big thing with Warrior Toughness, right? A lot of it's based on my time with Warrior Toughness. It's like, if you are interested in how professional athletes, if you're interested in how they do great things on that court, on that ball field, then why not learn the same things that they learn and use that to make yourself better, to be more effective, right? To deal with stresses, right? Because that's what they do. So if it's good enough for them, it's sure as hell good enough for me, and it should be for everybody else.
Yeah, and I always say, I'm on record for saying that we need to approach our career the same way professional athletes approach theirs, because this is our career. This is the career I chose. So I'm putting in the work, like you talked about earlier when we were talking about like robbing a grocery store or whatever, like that muscle memory, that practice and all. I'm putting in the work, I'm putting in the practice. I'm staying competitive until the day I walk off the floor. Or whatever like that. So I do correlate those two things. And then if people were looking for you, where could they find you?
Yeah, go to my website, StephenDrum.com, StephenDrum, like the instrument.com. And, you know, if you want to contact me through the website, connect with me, Stephen Drum on LinkedIn, or that's, you know, Instagram, Stephen.Drum. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. TikTok?
Nah, I'm staying away from TikTok for now. I know everybody's like, gotta get TikTok, grow your following. And I'm like, it's just not for me.
TikTok, I think TikTok was for you anyway.
Yeah, no,
TikTok ain't for everybody.
Yeah. My daughter does enough of that for all of us.
Yeah, has she tried to pull you in yet on a dance or anything?
Yeah, I think that's a while ago. I think I'm just too embarrassing for her right now. So
I remember I saw David on the TikTok dance, man.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, man. They got me when I was a little younger, man. They got me in the little dances, man.
They had David in the middle of the street. They had you in the middle of the street. Hey, David, you got any more?
Yeah, they was doing that little.
What was they doing? What was
Say again?
I was going to ask if you had any more any more questions for Steve.
No, I don't have no more questions, man. But I most definitely wanna thank Steve for coming on, man. This is like I learned a lot by listening to you, and I most definitely can tell you a speaker, man. Like you most definitely speak, and you're thoughtful when you speak and when you talk, man. So I very much enjoyed you on the episode. I will be pre-ordering the book. I'm just putting it out there right now. And Dumbo, you can count me on that. I'm going to pre-order the book. And Dumbo gonna keep me on the
Yeah, so you guys buy the book, I'll at least have 2 sales. So we got that.
Yeah. You got to.
Yo, your book is bought. The book is bought. And for all the listeners, I'm buying y'all all books too. All the listeners, check it out. I'm buying all books. I'm buying all y'all books too. We're gonna put it on Damon tab.
Woo! Well, I guess y'all ain't gonna have
I'll help you out, Damon.
Thank you.
Hey guys, it's been a great. I love the casual, free flowing conversation. It was great getting to know you guys for a couple hours, and again, thank you. Grateful to be able to share this time with you. Thanks for having me on.